little pull back the curtain. Kyle's student loan statement has been on the list of things to get to nearly as long as the Vegas story.
Yeah.
The boxing class.
Man, I've got some good stories. I should do my own podcast.
You did. Then you quit.
It sucked.
If they blew you off, they're dead to me. I'll burn their house down. I mean, I'd like the extra property.
You looking to eat up some land, are you?
Yeah, I mean, I got to find a place for the pool. Fall of 99.
Young, long-haired Steve.
Thinking about my lack of girlfriends.
Just ruining the day you were caught underwear wrestling. That hadn't happened
It hadn't happened for 3 years.
I'll never get caught underwear wrestling in my next house.
Narrator's note. Yes, he would. That hurts, man. It still hurts hearing that.
What, that part of the intro, or the idea that you were caught underwear wrestling in college by your attractive female neighbors?
The whole thing. The whole kit and caboodle. There's nothing about that story that doesn't make me wince.
I'm trying to think, because I know there has to be some items brought up on this show that I don't want to speak about, and I don't like.
Yeah.
But they're brought up, and you go with the flow, and it is a funny story. But I can't pinpoint what it is.
Yeah.
I could see how that would be between, and you have multiples that I know off the top of my head. The underwear wrestling.
Yeah.
Former boss Jack.
Boy, R.I.P. Jack.
Boy, I guess those are the main two.
Those two have been real sticking points in this podcast history.
But I think the problem...
Things that I hadn't thought about in years.
Yeah.
Years. And then they somehow bubble up to the surface while we're rambling on for an hour a week.
Yeah.
And it's weird because as quickly as they disappeared from my memory, they reappeared, but now they're ingrained. Like,
right.
They're just like hammer and chisel into rock, and they're boom right there. They're not going away.
And I feel like it doesn't bother you, but the jet ski tales I could listen to and talk about that for hours.
Yeah, jet ski tales I'm happy to talk about. There wasn't a whole lot there.
No.
I do remember getting that jet ski thinking, this is going to get me so many girls. And I can now count on one finger, minus one, the amount of girls that jet ski got me. I had a big crush on one particular girl at the time, and she was like because I lived at the Jersey Shore at the time,
right? And
she was one of those people that was like, goes to work, gets out of work, goes right to the beach, spends all weekend at the beach, and I'm like, I'm into the beach too. Side note, no, I wasn't.
You weren't like a beach bum.
The beach was fine,
yeah.
But for that brief period of time, I tried to convince myself, yeah, man, just go to work, and once the man lets me out after I put in my hard time, going to the beach, because that's where I live. That's what I do.
I'm an East Coast guy. I'll never leave.
No, I don't. The beach is fine.
Yeah.
I don't mind going to the beach, but like now. I mean, we have beautiful beaches here where we live.
Beautiful lakes.
Beautiful
like
lakes.
Massive lakes.
Yeah, the lakes, the side, they may as well be oceans because you can't see to the other side.
Some call them great.
Some do call them great. But I don't know, this past summer, I went to the beach like 2 times. Maybe summer before that, I don't know, 2, 3, if that.
Haven't been in 3 years.
And now that we have a child, going to the beach is going to be the most like horrifying experience I've ever had, because it's not just Annette with her chair and a bag, me with my chair and like a magazine or two,
or a cooler,
or headphones. Like a cooler that has a couple sandwiches and maybe a drink or two in it. Now it's just, I'm gonna be that guy that has the wagon with just
everything,
toys, and it's got hooks on the side, and all the hooks have 3 different bags on them.
Oh,
there's going to be diapers, and there's going to be swim diapers, and then there's going to be buckets and things to make sandcastles.
And you have to have like a little blanket because they can't just sit in the sand.
Yeah,
they got to have an umbrella because of the shade. You can't just have sun beating down on your child's face.
Or one of those little tents.
A tent?
Yeah, like the little baby tent.
I could see you
being
being
the worst summer ever coming up. Worst summer. Mark it down right now. Remember this. Steve says that summer 2020 is going to be the worst summer of his life.
As we move one step closer to Pool Steve.
Yeah. I'm just going to get a truckload of sand dropped off in my backyard. Like, we'll avoid the beach altogether. We'll just do it right here at the house. I'm going to put in an outdoor shower so you can shower off after a day at the pseudo beach in the backyard.
I think you do it right? You do an in-ground spot, or not spot, but a hot tub.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you got me. I'm on board.
Your semi-authentic beach pool.
Yeah, like where you walk in, like
you got to walk in. There's no steps,
no steps
down.
At all. Yeah,
not even like pavement. Like you don't feel concrete. You're just walking sand. And next thing you know, you're in a pool. Now you're gonna have a sandy pool, so you're gonna have a lot of issues with that in terms of the vacuuming and the filters.
It might be tough to keep clean.
But again, that's why I know you. So I don't have to worry about that.
Right.
And then when we leave after like 3 hours and wave goodbye.
You're coming over to Sandpool?
Oh, are you kidding me? Absolutely. That's the dream. Know someone who has these items.
Right. It's like a boat. You don't want to own a boat. You want to know someone who owns a boat.
Precisely. And so we'll wave goodbye, and then you'll spend 6 hours out back cleaning up sand from the bottom of the pool, sand from, whatever filters there are, turning off the heater because I'm not coming and swimming in a normal temperature pool.
So my beach sand pool now has to be heated.
Well, any scumbag can come swim in a 68-degree pool. Hey, who wants that?
I'm not disagreeing.
So
I'm just making a checklist of the things I have to do.
Probably have to run a gas line in the yard to get out there.
Well, plus we're going to have the beach bonfire out there, too.
Oh, my gosh, a little gas fire, so you don't have to worry about. Because, listen, the worst part about a fire, everybody claims, let's go have a fire. Let's go sit out by the fire. Nobody wants to start and get the fire built.
No.
So you have the gas line. Yeah. Oh, yeah. A little gas fire.
Yep. You know what's going to be great about beach backyard sand pool? Mm-hmm. In the winter, when it freezes over, then we can play beach backyard sand pool hockey.
We're going to have a hockey rink.
Or figure skating. Maybe maybe Evelyn or Reed will want to, follow in the footsteps of Brian Boitano.
They could be ice skating while you and I are trying to put on pads and shoot rubber pucks at each other on one end.
Yeah, this is all likely.
Which at that point we're going to need to get you like a tractor or a riding lawnmower that we can convert into a Zamboni.
Sure. Well, I got the mower. I'll figure out some way.
Man, Pool Steve, we're really elevating your status as we're now at Backyard Beach Sand Pool.
Man, this is going to have to be a big pool, isn't it? Which, it makes sense because after last week's episode where you heard it in the intro, where I threatened to burn down my neighbor's house.
Yes.
And then acquire their property for a pool. Do I just knock down the house and build a pool where the house was?
I think the pool goes over the house. Or like not over the house, but where the house was. And I don't want to get too far removed from that because I have questions in regard to an update on that.
Well, before we get to that, though, I want to talk about going back even further. Mm-hmm. Where we talked about the underwear wrestling.
Yes, yeah.
When I was in college.
Yeah.
Now I've been that happened. You know my friend Frank.
Yep.
Frank, who we've referenced, I think, last week on the podcast.
Yep, we've had him on the podcast. He's bleep him on the podcast.
Been on the podcast. He was at my bachelor party, and Frank is a great guy. I've known him for 20 years at this point. He was one of the first people that I met at Monmouth University in August of 1999. I showed up to college not knowing one person there, and within like a day, I became good friends with Frank. Mm-hmm. And Frank was there. Frank was at the underwear wrestling event, and we need to call him at some point to get him on and see if he has any memory of that, because that was during a time when I don't believe Frank was straight edge. He
so no drinking, no drugs,
no
none
drinking.
Of that stuff.
Yeah, didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't do any drugs. And I believe that was all the way through college, but I guess I'm not positive. So
I look at Frank now, and I think Frank doing a couple lines in the morning for the day, smoking a couple joints in the evening to come down.
I guess I don't know. I've seen Frank one time in the last 5 years or so. It was at my bachelor party a couple years ago. He could be into coke.
Just real busy.
He did not. Yeah, he was
coming to the wedding, and then there's that meal. That chicken's cold now.
There was one place card left on the place card table.
Yeah,
belonged to Frank.
Well, he ordered the filet.
That's all right though, Frank. It's all right.
Forgive and forget. Yeah, we should get in touch with Frank.
In all seriousness, if Frank is listening to this, he's not. I am 100% okay, because he got in touch with me that morning saying I can still catch a flight that'll get me there.
Sleep through his flight?
No. His flight, there was some issue. His flight was canceled or something.
That's what happens with coke users.
I did feel bad for him because I know that he wanted to be there and couldn't for a myriad of reasons. Totally cool.
So did the chicken that he bought, or that you bought.
I bet that chicken wanted to be alive. Something that chicken wouldn't have had to give his life.
Yep. There's somebody out back and had to apologize to this chicken before beheading it.
Yeah.
Saying this one's for Frank. He requested fresh chicken breast and gave it the old whack.
So we will need to schedule a time when Frank joins us on the podcast.
Yeah,
again.
we should talk to Frank.
There's also something I'm working on because Frank has his own podcast with his buddy, with a buddy of his. I won't say his buddy's name because I don't want to give them any free advertising.
No, there's no free plugs here.
I want to do a podcast listener swap with him because I've listened to a bunch of episodes. They've been doing a podcast. They did a podcast together for 10 years, which 10 years ago to be doing a podcast, nobody was doing them now. Now, everyone does a podcast.
I mean, I was.
Well, yeah.
How that worked.
I mean, you showed them. You showed the world.
I believe that first incarnation was a little off topic.
A little off topic,
yeah, and that lasted a handful of episodes with what seemed to be a revolving door of co-hosts. But I was the constant.
But you know what I mean? 10 years ago, it wasn't nearly as common for people to be doing
Absolutely. There was
podcasts.
a dozen of them out there in 2009.
Now, everyone does a podcast. There's probably a guy that does a podcast about vacuuming or flying kites. There is a podcast for any interest that anyone may have. So I want to work out a podcast listener swap because listen to a bunch of episodes of his podcast over the last week or so because he sent me a text. He's like, "Hey man, can you? We just relaunched our podcast because they had stopped doing it for a little while. Kind of relaunched it, rebranded it.
Not a little while, like a long while.
I'm not sure how long they were off.
Well, if I recall correctly, Frank sat at the bachelor party. I talked with Frank quite a bit. I'm a people person, Steve.
Yeah, of course. I know. There's nobody that likes to make friends more than my co-host Kyle.
It's weird, and I don't want to digress too much, but it is weird
that's
because
right. That's what we do.
I don't seek out going oh man, they live nearby, they could be friends or whatever. But at your bachelor party, when I showed up there, I knew Joe. Friend of your side gig, and I'd known him for years. He used to, him and his wife Dana they would go out with us before they had kids.
Hockey games.
After hockey games, yeah. So I knew Joe. That was it. Mm-hmm. And by the time I left there, man, me and Bob were buddies.
Oh, Bob, yeah.
Me and Frank and myself.
Frank is
chatted with him a lot.
Frank gets along with anybody he meets. He's just one of those people. I'm very envious of people like that where they can meet people immediately, start conversations, find common bonds, and just become friends. I've never been one of those people.
Right.
I get awkward after 3 minutes. Once we get past what do you do? Oh, neat. Oh, I know a guy who works there. Do you know so-and-so? No? You like chicken? No?
Oof, vegan. Oh, boy.
Time to go. I mean, hey, it's great to get to know you.
Yeah.
And then 3 days later, I send them a Facebook friend request.
But when I met with him and we were interacting, and I believe the three of us were even having a conversation about his former podcast, because at this point, your bachelor party, if I'm thinking correctly, we were fundraising for the billboard.
Already?
already, you don't remember, Steve, we fundraised and we didn't do the billboard for another year.
Was it really that long?
We ended our fundraising in May of 2017, I believe.
Because the bachelor party would have been...
Or 18.
Bachelor party was August of 17. Because I got married in November of 17.
Sure.
Man, I don't know. Everything's just all running together.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But we were talking, and we were mentioning our fundraising efforts, and he had talked about his fundraising effort that they ran and the previous incarnation of their podcast.
That's right. I forgot about the biggest scam that's ever been pulled off by
and
a
it
podcast.
had been some time since that happened, he told us. Because I said, well, what's the update
oh, God,
on it?
I remember that had to have been 6 years ago.
And he had said that it was... Like the podcast had ended, obviously, since then.
I think
they've been off for at least 3 to 4 years.
Well, because part of that time, Frank had moved. He lived in San Francisco, but
sure.
he only lived there for a couple months, and then he moved back. But yeah, so I don't know what they're. I don't know if they were doing one every week, and then it was every month, and maybe every 2 months. But yeah, so they're back doing them. I've listened to a bunch of episodes, and I really enjoy it. And listening to it, it felt very familiar, and I think because they do. It sounds a lot like how we have conversations on this podcast. So I'm going to try and work out. I sent him a text a little while ago.
A little free-flowing.
Said, yo, Frank, let's do a podcast listener swap.
Hang on. You sent him a text a little while ago?
Yeah.
You know what time it is in San Francisco?
He lives in Brooklyn now.
Oh, I apologize. That's
same
right.
time.
That's right. You did just say that. I thought he had moved back. I thought he was there for a little bit, moved back, and then ended up going back to San Francisco.
No, he is back in Brooklyn.
Gotcha. Okay.
By the way, it is Saturday, December 14th, 2019, the year of our Lord. It's the Steve and Kyle podcast.
We have to get to something quickly, but I did want to put a bow on that, Steve, because we're not going to get into many of the details. You'll hear them when we unveil them in the new year because we haven't really overly discussed them. There's going to be some changes, slight, somewhat major, whatever, varying degrees of changes to the podcast in the new year.
Basically, what we're talking about is the winding down of the podcast.
Yeah, we're looking for a way out.
We're looking to be out of this thing by the time we hit the 4-year anniversary, which will be in June.
June of 2020 will be the anniversary of the first episode released of this podcast. But yeah, there are going to be a few changes. We're looking at whatever, a lot of different things. So when we talk about the Fast Five, that will be a little different when it comes back. When we inevitably remember to bring that back. But
we haven't done a Fast Five since like October, right?
To speak to your point, it feels like it. To speak to your point, Steve, this new year, I would like to reinvigorate the idea. And I know I've mentioned it a few times, and this has totally been on our end in terms of lack of planning and execution. I would love to bring back the idea of some podcast swaps. So we'll appear on your podcast. We'll call you up during ours, and we'll chit-chat for a few minutes, kind of like we do with 2 minutes of awkward conversation.
Yeah.
Now, this is good for... Listen,
we'll
it's
call
a
it
benefit
2 minutes
for
of
everybody.
awkward podcasting.
Yeah. And it's a good thing for everybody involved. We would like to get some new earballs into this thing, and it's good for other podcasts who, to have us on there. And it's the same idea. It's a swap, and I love talking to people. We've talked about it, and we mention it every single time we get off the phone with somebody. That's usually my favorite part of an episode.
Yeah.
I absolutely love having a conversation with people that I haven't met before and I don't have to see in person, and I can just talk to them.
That's the key.
That is the key. I don't want to look them in the eye. Yuck. So if you are interested in that, and I know we have some podcasts that follow us on social media and people who are involved with podcasts. I know Stan the Movie Man does a movie podcast and a comedy podcast. I know our friend Jesse Douglas is involved in a podcast. We have multiples that follow us. Please send us a message on Twitter and Facebook. Let us know, and we can try to hammer out a date, and we can maybe... we record typically in the mornings on the weekend. We can maybe make an exception on some afternoons, but if we can work out a hit, at least on our end during that point, that would be preferable. But send us a message there for some new stuff coming up here in the new year for the Steve and Kyle podcast.
I'm looking forward to it. I am. We need to put a fresh coat of paint on the old podcast.
Yeah, I think I was going to change the Twitter photo, which we've had since day one.
Why would you do that?
We just got some different designs.
What's it going to be?
Fresh coat of paint. I was literally just going to steal one of Philip's designs that he had emailed us. But it has to be edited because the Twitter avatar is a circle, and if I do the circle, half the lettering gets cut off. So
cuts off some of the jokes.
Has to be resized. So, again, please send us a message if you're interested in that and you host or co-host or a part of a podcast or even if it's a podcast that you know. Mm-hmm. Like your friend runs a podcast. You don't have to be a part of it. Yeah. And you think, hey, they would benefit from this or we would benefit from having them on. That would be the way to do it. And maybe we start that with our friend and former guest on this show who couldn't stop swearing, Steve's friend Frank.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, we'll keep the cost low.
Do you think he's too
It's not
going to
cost you too much. I don't know. He was on the leading edge of the podcast movement back in the late aughts.
Well, Steve, I hate to cut any of that short, but we are on a crunch in terms of having to get a hold of somebody because 'tis the season, Steve.
It sure is.
It is the holiday season, the solstice season, and we mentioned this about a month ago when we had him on the phone, and it's time we get a hold of again our friend in the field, our in-the-field Jewish correspondent, Brian, to ask questions from a couple of idiots.
I believe that was the name he came up with.
We came up with it after the fact, after the first time we talked to him.
I think he approved it.
Yeah, it was approved. But I have heard some rumblings this morning around the office that somebody, in preparation for this moment, may have put together a little piece for us to welcome Brian into the show to because you got to have a sequitur. You can't just have, Steve and Kyle talking about let's exchange podcast hits and then boom, in the field Jewish correspondent Brian's on the phone.
No, we
need something to break that up.
Yeah, I was sent this intro by Kevin in production department. So, you ready?
Let's give this thing a whirl. Let's see what we got.
This is not something we asked for. I don't believe we need it, but hey, we'll be the judge of that.
Again, nuclear.
Oh, it's the Who.
Nice. All right.
I like it so far.
Oh, groovy.
Jew.
Oh.
Jew. Huh.
Oh, boy.
I believe that was the Who's Who Are You?
Yeah.
Turned into Who Are Jew. Was that then Jew Who Jew?
I mean, maybe one more time so we can... Because whose voice was that? I mean...
Jew. Sounds like you.
Excuse you. This will be dealt with. Kevin! Kevin!
He's not in on Saturdays.
For God's sake. Well, I guess we'll... You know that's going up the HR flagpole.
Yeah. All right. Well, while we're at it. Oh, look at that. I got a text back from Frank.
Yeah, is Frank
deal.
in?
He says deal. What does that mean?
Okay. Hook, line. Hang on. Now's where we negotiate financial terms.
Do you want to call Frank right now? We can call Frank first.
I don't.
Okay.
He has to be somewhere in 20 minutes.
Okay. Let's get to
in the field.
All right. What's his name?
Brian.
Brian
Krause, our in the field
Matt.
Jewish correspondent.
Definitely not Matt. What's his name? Brian.
It's still Brian.
Come on, Brian.
Come on, Brian.
Could be a temple.
Come on, Brian.
Okay.
All right, Brian.
All right.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated...
Pretty sure he said he'd be available.
Yeah, he said he needed to be somewhere by 10:30.
It's 10:05.
10:05. I said it would be within the next hour. And in fairness, it's been an hour and 14 minutes since I said that, but it's not our fault. We had to wait for Kevin to send that production audio over.
Okay.
You think he heard that? I think Brian heard that and that was the deal breaker?
That concludes this week's episode of Who Are Jew? Jew.
Well, we'll get Brian back on in probably next week.
Look forward to talking to Brian next time.
Now, did we want to pivot quickly to either talk to Frank? We also have a 2 minutes of awkward conversation that's been in the books, or that's been waiting for about a month. What do you have a preference, or we bump all of it?
I'm sending Frank a quick follow-up text, see if he's available. If he is, we'll give him a ring.
As always, it holds true that your name will be on the list if you leave us a review, or if you've been someone that's binged. We also have to talk to our friend Dan Scheich again, who has completed his binge re-listen of the Steve and Kyle podcast. If you've done that, let us know as well, and we will put you on the list. You getting a call there, Steve?
Looks like someone's calling me back.
Is that Brian?
Should we go to it?
Whatever makes that sound stop.
Steve and Kyle podcast.
It's Brian.
Hey, Brian, how are you, man?
Good. How you doing? Sorry about that. I had my phone charging and stepped away for a minute and didn't hear it ring.
That's all right. We figured such was the case.
Yeah. Now you can't hear it, Brian, but someone in our production team has made a beautiful new intro song for your appearances on the show. So I'll be curious.
Awesome.
I guess we should have run it up the flagpole for approval first, but what's done is done, and if heads need to roll, Kevin in production is an easy head to lop off. So when you hear that this week on the podcast, let us know if it's approved or not on your end.
I will definitely.
All right, Brian, it's the holiday season. Happy holidays to you and yours.
And to you as well.
Now, I believe in the last time we talked to you, you said that your family kind of celebrates both, right? Like you're going to be celebrating both Christmas and Hanukkah this year?
Yes.
So is the Christmas tree up?
No, we'll probably be getting that tomorrow.
Okay, all right. So
you're a late buyer. You going off the scrap heap, Brian?
What's that?
You going off the scrap heap? You going to the lots and asking like, hey, you're low on trees, I'll give you half off type of thing? Is that why you wait so long?
No, it's more of not wanting a fire hazard for very long.
Oh,
come on.
They dry out quick.
That doesn't happen anymore. That's
it's a myth. You just throw a bucket of water underneath it, right? Don't you put the tree in a 5-gallon bucket?
You water it, but at some point it dies, and then the needles all start falling off. So we usually do it about 10 days prior, and leave it up for like another week or two after, and that way it kind of maximizes the effect if we can.
You got to go fake tree, man. I was anti-fake tree.
Fake tree.
Can't do big tree. We got a small room.
No.
So
Fake tree.
Low ceilings.
I was
no fake trees. Nope. I've been told that very specific. No fake trees.
Wow.
Okay.
So you've been put in your place in regards to the tree. Now, do you have?
I'd be good either way. So it doesn't matter to me whether it's a fake tree or a real tree. If she wants a real tree, I'm fine with that.
I was anti-fake tree for the longest time because I remember for a while when I was growing up, we had a fake tree, and that was during the time when fake trees looked like fake trees.
Right.
They looked like hell.
Yeah.
And it took like 4 hours to put the things up because you had to take each branch out individually, unfold it, and
hook it
fluff
in.
it up a bit. But now, last year or the year before, we got a fake tree. It's a pre-lit fake one. It comes in 3 sections. You take it out of the box. You put the base down, then the middle section snaps in, and then the top one snaps into that, and all of the lights, like you don't have to plug, the only thing is you plug one thing into the wall, whole thing lights up. It's got a little foot switch on it, so you just step on the switch and turn it on. And then you take about 10 minutes to unfold the branches, and that thing looks so good. It's incredible.
Nice.
Get one. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
man.
Brian, for God's sake,
Put the thing up in like October. It's not going to burn down.
I don't know. There's something about the smell of a Christmas tree, though.
Well, just get a.
There's also something about the smell of a burned down home when it dries out and catches on fire.
All right, so talk Hanukkah to us. We don't really have any questions about it, but we want to hear about it from your perspective.
Yeah, how are you balancing both of these now, Brian? Because as you essentially admitted to us last time, you said you're a fake Jewish correspondent, that you only half celebrate and half study.
Yeah.
So how do you balance both of these during the same time and explain that to your children?
Sure. Well, it's pretty simple. They know, and at this point, they're 14 and 16, so they're definitely old enough to understand, and they have been for a few years. But they, usually they're separated enough. This year, they cross over each other just because of the timing of it. Hanukkah starts on the 22nd this year, but a lot of years it starts, end of November, early December. So you have a nice separation between the two. For us, really, Hanukkah, it's mostly about lighting the candles. There's not a whole lot beyond that, unless you're really, kind of not hardcore, but, more orthodox.
What about the dreidel? You spin the dreidel, right? Oh, dreidel. I made it out of clay.
Never spun a dreidel.
Really?
Whoa.
Yeah, no.
I think I've spun a dreidel.
Again, like I said last time, growing up, we didn't really celebrate Hanukkah. It wasn't until I was, late teens before my father started celebrating, and I kind of jumped into it. It was nice to kind of embrace the heritage that I hadn't really done.
Yeah.
My kids have always enjoyed it, so.
Now, we come to you for answers, Brian, so can you explain to Steve and I, a couple of dummies, about why Hanukkah's dates can change so wildly?
Yes.
Why does it end of November or the week overlapping Christmas sometimes?
And that's because Judaism is all based around the lunar calendar as opposed to the Gregorian or solar calendar.
Okay, so you're reading horoscopes and...
Yeah, same thing. That's why Easter varies every year. That's why all the Jewish holidays vary from across the year. It's just because it's all based on the lunar calendar.
Now, you're as we talked about, as you mentioned, you're kind of doing both. So are you simply lighting the candles for Hanukkah and doing Christmas morning gifts so that tradition, or are you doing Hanukkah gifts in addition to Christmas morning gifts?
No, we don't do Hanukkah gifts. My father will send the boys a Hanukkah gift. It's not 8 gifts. It's usually a gift card of some sort. Mm-hmm. If you really want to get into it, Hanukkah is not about giving gifts. I believe that was kind of in response to Christmas, kind of the commercialism around Christmas, that they said, oh, it's 8 nights, let's do 8 gifts. If you really kind of delve into the history of the holiday, it has nothing to do with gifts, which I guess is kind of the same way with Christmas, too.
What are you talking about? That's the only Christmas.
I know.
Christmas is all about Santa Claus,
fat man, red suit,
bringing me toys.
Yes,
you're right.
Now, have you thought about
Santa's birthday? Is that?
Have you thought about splitting this up, almost like a divorced family has to do, where you split it? So 2019, you'll celebrate Christmas. You'll have, Santa Claus out in the yard as an inflatable, and then 2020, nothing but Jewish representation in the home. Have you thought about doing it that way?
I don't know. I don't think that would fly, and honestly, I don't think I would want to do it that way either. I enjoy both ends of it. It's nice to, every year the kids like going and lighting the candles. They alternate each night. One lights the candles, the other reads the prayer, and then the next night they switch. And then Christmas morning, we get up, open the gifts. We have a nice Christmas breakfast. We go visit some family in the afternoon. I don't think I'd want to change that.
You're a double dipper. You're trying to play both sides, aren't you?
It's a good move.
When you have split heritage, especially with, my kids, they're half Catholic, half Jewish.
Right.
So, I think it's important for them to understand both sides of it. And if they can get double exposure to that, they seem to enjoy doing Hanukkah. They probably don't remember as much doing some of the other stuff like Seders and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Spring.
Exactly. For the Amish side of us.
Now, Brian, is there an equivalent? And again, excuse my ignorance on these. I don't mean to insult. Yeah. That's not the point. Is there like a Jewish equivalent of the Catholic? The big thing in Catholicism would be the midnight mass or the Christmas Eve mass. Is there an equivalent of that for Hanukkah for Judaism?
So actually, it was funny. I kind of figured you guys were going to be asking about this, so I was doing a little more digging in this morning about it. And where Hanukkah is a little different than, like, let's say Passover and Yom Kippur, they are not hardened religious holidays, like when you get into like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where you're kind of reflecting on the year, and it's a very sacred time, or Passover, which, it really gets into the whole Jews leaving Egypt and getting their freedom. And there's a really strong religious aspect to it. In reading up on Hanukkah, it's not really. It's almost a more secular, it's a celebratory holiday. So, like, where on the Sabbath, a Jew is not supposed to do any work. You're not supposed to, quote unquote, light fire, which, gets interpreted different ways.
Like actual fires, or like igniting an argument with a relative. Yeah.
Well, yeah, more of literal fire, when you're going back more to, the times of, Christ and around there, with obviously no electricity. So some very Orthodox would view putting on a light switch as kind of creating that spark, which is fire. Same thing with like starting a car, in kind of the traditional sense.
Isn't that inconvenient? So you can't turn on a light switch?
So for some people, no. Very Orthodox. Okay. They're very, to the letter, and then you have kind of the more, I don't want to say liberal, but, kind of people who view the changing of times and, understanding that.
Sure.
Same thing like in Catholicism. If you go back and look at what a true Catholic is compared to what someone is today, it's very different. So it's the same thing in Judaism. Okay. You have some who are hard and fast with, this is the letter of the law in Judaism. For example, eating pork. In Judaism, it's strictly outlawed.
Oh, it's so delicious,
in
though.
Reality,
have they ever had ribs?
People see it there. Yeah. Well, it
like a nice pork loin.
Pulled pork sandwiches.
Yeah,
but again,
bacon!
For some like a true Jewish deli, you cannot get cheese and meat because you're not supposed to.
Sure. Yeah.
To mix the two.
Wow, I had no idea.
You go to a true Jewish deli, and they don't have cheese. It's all meats.
Well, I mean,
no milk, same thing.
I remember when I was in college, I worked for a moving company over the summers, and we would. I remember specifically a couple houses that we moved. It was a Jewish family, and in their kitchen there were 2 refrigerators, 2 stoves, and it was like. It wasn't even up for discussion whether you could combine, like, oh, this box came out of here and this one came out of here. We'll just throw them together and put them in the truck. It was everything had to be separated. Like,
oh yeah, there are hotels that have 2 separate kitchens.
Wow.
Yeah, and again, it was funny. In college, I took a course on Judaism because, at that point in my life, I really didn't know much about it. So I had to take some religious classes because that was a requirement to graduate. So I'm like, well, they have Jewish classes. I'll learn about that. Mm-hmm. I had one of my professors was a rabbi. And what I learned in that is that a lot of these laws were based on kind of guides to survival. So the whole thing with the pork and not eating it was pork didn't keep well. So if you tried to eat pork, it was highly likely that you could get sick and die from it. So rather than risk people do that, they made essentially a law that said, don't eat pork.
Oh, boy, that's so short-sighted. Like, just
in today's environment, we have refrigeration, we have, we can cure our meats, and so it's not as much an issue. But a lot of those were, a lot of what the stories in the Bible are all based on kind of lack of knowledge.
Sure, you look at it and it's completely outdated now because it's a couple thousand years old.
So progressive people will kind of take that into account and say, well, we get the whole pork thing, but I'm not going to get sick and die from it. So,
and also bacon's delicious.
Pork.
Yeah, and I mean, you cannot.
And then you have those groups who hold on to the strictest law of nope, says you can't eat it, and we're not eating it.
Yeah, you cannot downplay the deliciousness of like a nice thick cut of crispy bacon. I mean,
applewood smoked.
Look, that'll turn anybody. That'll turn any religion upside down. You just sample a piece of bacon.
That'll turn any Orthodox Jew into a halvesy like Brian. Now, Brian, we do have to let you go here in a minute. I did want to ask, though, regarding that. I'm assuming you know and are, you communicate with some families that are that Orthodox and that traditional. Are you shunned or are you looked down on because of the way you've done it?
I don't think so. I don't really, from an Orthodox perspective, honestly, I don't really know a lot of Orthodox Jewish people. Most of the people who I know, like I actually have a coworker who is, goes to temple, goes to temple for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, fasts for the whole day, does the whole 9 yards. But, I think most people are, hey, you're kind of taking in and honoring your religion. If you do it in your own way, we're good with that. Same thing, like, with, Catholics who don't go to church, as long as you kind of have that internal belief and, you kind of stick to the morals and ethics that are set forth. And I think most people are pretty good with that.
Wow. Well, a lot of good info, Brian. Thank you for picking up, and apologies for the late notice. We know you have to get going. You're going to volunteer today, and we were stealing some of your time on the way to do that. So we can't thank you enough for the time.
My pleasure.
All right, Brian.
Looking
happy
forward
Hanukkah.
To it. So is it?
What was
you
it?
as well. Well, Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Were you about?
And hopefully we'll be able to talk in the spring if the show's still around.
Well, I mean, let's not get carried away now, Brian.
Let's not get carried away. Shalom, happy Hanukkah, and enjoy your rum springer. We'll talk to you around Rosh Hashanah or Passover or whatever any of the other ones I have questions about are.
Definitely, yep. I'm always available. Just let me know, and I'm happy to talk.
Talk to you later. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
I love talking to our in-the-field Jewish correspondent. Okay, apparently we have to play this out.
Kevin run the board now, too?
Jew. Yeah, it's a hidden cut on the Who's album, apparently.
Yeah, that's like if you... What is it, like the Dark Side of the Moon, that if you play that in reverse...
Play backwards, yeah.
So if you go back and play The Who Are You, in reverse...
Yeah, it says Paul is dead.
And you get this weird cut, and you unlock a code. It's like a Nintendo game.
Do you want to go from guest directly into another guest?
Sure,
All right.
Yeah.
Because we're going to call college friend Frank.
Have you told him not to curse?
No, I haven't. Not yet.
Oh, great. Well, you got to bleep it, not me.
Frankie Frank.
Hey, Steve. How are you?
What's up, buddy? How are you, man?
Pretty good. Just waking up. You guys record it early, huh?
Yeah, we do. We knock it out early on Saturday, so we have the rest of the weekend to do nothing really. I don't have any other plans. But we used to record on Sunday mornings, and then I felt like when we were done recording, my weekend was over, even though it was only like 11 a.m. So we pushed it back a day.
That's smart.
I mean, there's a lot to get to. I have a lot to do these days.
Now, Frank, has anybody told you?
Yeah, exactly.
Has anybody told you, Frank, you got a heck of a set of pipes?
I have heard that, yes. I think you told me that once before, actually.
It wouldn't surprise me. I'm a broken record, Frank, and I love hearing them. I can listen to these pipes every day. I wish you had a podcast.
Well...
Frank, there's a couple of questions that we have for you.
Uh-huh.
One of them is what I was just texting you about. But before we get to that, I need to know. It's been a bit of a trope on this podcast. We've talked about it numerous times.
Uh-huh.
It is referred to as the underwear wrestling incident.
Okay.
I need to know if, by me just saying underwear wrestling incident, do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm guessing it's Mark?
Mark?
In college?
No, it's not Mark in college.
Okay. Then I'm not sure.
Do you remember it was
It's gonna be like a reveal or something? It's gonna be a gross reveal for me or something?
No. But I think you'll remember it once I tell you about it. But it was sophomore year of college. We were over at the townhouse, 22 Matilda Terrace, I believe it was.
Yep.
And we were like starting our own wrestling league.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Embarrassingly so. Yes.
A quick interjection. How did you guys have time with all the sex you were surely having?
It was difficult. We let them watch, it got them worked up, and then pounced afterwards. Yeah.
So
it was like a foreplay, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Just needed to wet their whistle a bit.
Yes.
So
yes,
we decided that we each took on our own character, and
oh my God.
And we pushed the couches out of the way in the living room.
Yeah.
We threw some couch cushions on the ground. And then we choreographed actual wrestling matches.
This is deeply, deeply embarrassing already. But
it's terrible.
Please continue. Yes.
Had you forgotten about that? Had you pushed this so far down into your psyche that you didn't remember it?
Yeah, it didn't fall into my college experience memory. No.
So this
hey
story,
man, tell me about your rad college days.
Yeah. This wasn't going to make the Frank autobiography then someday.
Yeah. Like, what was Monmouth University like? That wasn't going to make the cut.
Well, if you're a loser, you can hang out with other losers and wrestle.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I specifically remember there was one night where we were all wrestling.
In character and in costume.
In character, in costume.
Obviously, yeah.
And one of us was recording because I think Ray had a video camera.
Of course, you want to document this sort of thing, too.
Right, yeah, because these are the days that you'll look back on and say, those were the days, man. Those were the days. Yeah. And do you remember I remember we just referred to them as the hot girls that live next door to
They were just like probably middle-aged women. They were probably like
again at that
mom
age
and her daughter going to work every day.
But we were convinced we were going to make them the hot girls no matter what.
Yeah.
And we hadn't you and I didn't live there, so we wouldn't our interactions with them would have been much less, but the three guys that did live there, they never interacted with them ever,
no.
other than a hey, hi.
Yeah.
Oh,
sure.
A lot of snow today. Okay.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, that was the day that they decided to just walk over and come in that back door into the kitchen while we were dancing around wrestling.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
In the living room. And I distinctly remember because I was in the middle of a match. And
and they were a title fight.
Yeah, it was a title match.
Yeah, I mean this one was for the belt. And they walked in the door, and all of us just froze. And then I ran up the steps and hid.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Listen, this is
what 18. You're able to vote at that age, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, sophomore year. So we're talking 2000, 2001. Yeah, I was 20 years old. And I was wrestling with my buddies on a Saturday night.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, this was not...
So that doesn't ring any bells for you, Frank? You don't remember that specific time that assuredly those hot girls were coming over because, they'd been overtaken by lust, and they decided tonight was the night they were going to go ravage their neighbors. You don't remember that?
I mean, it's all coming back to me now, I will say. If I'm on trial, which I feel like I am, I would say it's all coming back to me now. Yeah.
Oh no! Look, this is not meant as an attack at all because I know. I'm just as guilty as you are. So if we're doing time, we're doing time together.
I've just been, Frank, to clarify, since this podcast, that story came out, I have been looking for an expert or somebody who was there who could relive that and maybe give me. I don't care. The smallest shred of further detail because I live and thrive off of this story. And the only other person involved is a man that Steve will never speak to or talk about again.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
There's been a whole other thread on this show on our podcast about Ray and getting in touch with Ray again. We even came up with an idea for a spin-off of the podcast, and it was called Ray Connections, where people, if they want to reconnect with someone that they knew, but they have to be named Ray.
Yep, it's the only way it works.
They could get in touch with us. It's a really limited scope, but we think it has a chance.
Can their last name be Ray, like Donnie Ray? Or
Ooh,
sure.
Yeah, we'll make some.
okay.
Listen, the scope's already too limited. We're gonna have to make some concessions to make this work.
If you go to our merch store, we actually have a T-shirt it's the old Love Connection logo, but somebody edited it to say Ray Connections.
That's funny.
I don't think it's ever sold one.
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero sales. Nobody wants that.
So I can confirm this took place as far as like intimate details. I remember there being leg drops. I remember there being like, because Brian was the most like sexually repressed of all of us, right?
That is 100% true.
So I think
although
he
I
had
don't
the
know
most,
though.
like-
I don't know, Dave.
Ooh, yeah, no, tough. That's tough.
Or
I
Ray.
would say
What are we
Brian-
talking about? Or Ray. I mean, that's like that is a three-way of no sex.
That's true.
Like, not to say that you and I were
No.
like topping the charts or anything, but
Yeah.
there wasn't much going on in that house.
There was not, no. And but there was like a real sense of like boyish like glee and mischief in that room. Yes. Which makes me very uncomfortable right now. But I think that led to, because wrestling wasn't even popular or cool then.
Well,
We
that
just had
was
nothing else to do.
Yeah, but boyish glee and mischief is the most accurate description of that time frame for all of us that I've ever heard.
Well, because it was probably the first time most all of you had lived alone. Well, not alone, but outside of your parents' dwelling.
Yeah.
Yes.
And apparently you guys decided to revert back to what normally 8-year-olds would do.
So something that I think about a lot from that era, I'm not sure, Steve, if you remember this, but I didn't have my own computer.
Okay, yeah.
And so Steve and I shared a room, and Steve had some, old, like, late 90s laptop with a big old monitor, the whole nine. And I would use Steve's computer to, check my email and also look at pornography when Steve wasn't in the room, as a cool roommate does.
Right, yeah. I did the same thing with Stewie freshman year.
That was awful nice. He had to wait for when he wasn't in the room, I think. Very courteous of you, Frank.
That would be weird if I was just like, hey, check this out.
Yeah, Frank, we never had that kind of relationship, like hey, check out the porno I'm watching.
It's like, hey, you should get a higher resolution monitor.
I would argue it would be more problematic for people who did have that relationship.
Hey, the refresh rate on your monitor is making it look like a flip book when I'm watching porno.
So I guess I had used your laptop, and we both came back, and I left. We both came back to the dorm room. And you turn on your monitor. I guess I forgot to close the last fuse screen. You remember this?
I don't. So this must have been sophomore year then, when we were in.
And it was like a blonde, like busty woman just eating a banana, topless.
So, but how does this play?
Wait, hold on. So that I don't want to dig too deep, but is that what you were into? That's
the kind of hardcore shit I was into at the time. This is a pre-9/11 world, by the way.
Yeah, times were more innocent then, Frank.
Exactly.
You're excused. Now you seem to remember this a little more, Frank. So Steve turns on the monitor and sees this. How does Steve play it? Cool roommate, just close the window and move on? Or does Steve go, hey, you frickin' weirdo, what the heck is this?
He just turns over and he's like, come on, Frank.
And oh man, I'm happy to know that I'm consistent, because that would be my exact reaction now.
Yes.
I just look at you and go, really? Like, really?
Yeah.
One,
Yes,
this is what you're into, and two, you couldn't even close the window.
Yep. I got too worked up to cover my tracks, apparently.
Man, oh man. Well, so
Boy.
again, simpler times, Frank.
I love talking about this stuff, because every time I do, it brings back a million other memories that I had forgotten about and are just fantastic.
Yeah. I bring that up because I think the same level of like innocence and like perviness was in the room when we were wrestling as well. Like somehow we thought there was like a sexual energy to a non homoerotic yet homoerotic
right
sexual energy.
Well, I mean, wrestling in its purest form is a bit homoerotic.
Oh, no question.
To begin with, you're rolling around with other men, barely clothed.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So I'm happy to know that we weren't too far outside of what was normal.
Yeah. I'm happy to relive these memories with you on a recorded format.
Yeah. I'm sure that everyone up and down Matilda Terrace was doing the same thing we were on Friday and Saturday nights.
Matilda Terrace, yeah, wow.
Just a lot of waves out the windows like, hey, how's wrestling going tonight?
So the reason I wanted to call you had sent me a text maybe a week ago or so, saying, "Hey, me and Eric started up the podcast again. Can you give us a plug on Instagram?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, happy to do it." And so I
call out my desperate, thirsty ploy, but yes, you could have just said, "Hey, we have a new podcast."
No. I need to show how pathetic you were.
Yes. Okay.
No, I didn't take it like that at all. Honestly.
No, I'm kidding.
So I said, yeah, definitely, but I knew I was traveling over the last couple of days, so I'm like, I'm going to download a bunch of episodes and listen to it, because before I promote it, I want to make sure you guys,
of course,
you're not going rogue. You're not like Hitler Youth all of a sudden or anything, because that would have been a weird turn. And I hadn't listened to your podcast in a while, because you guys recorded for like 10 years, right?
Yeah. It wasn't like a gotcha moment, but we had done a podcast for about 10 years that was just about like our lives essentially. Mm-hmm. And like as the things you say 10 years ago, as the story we just told proves, don't always hold up super well.
Definitely not, especially not in this era.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we decided to just like sort of scrap it and start over. And it's been a lot of fun, and it's been sort of a new format. And yeah, it's been great. It feels like a little fresh start. So we basically like review something that doesn't matter and it's not culturally relevant at all, but we enjoy.
I've listened to, I think, your first 5 or 6 episodes.
Oh, great.
So the first one, it was I think it's called Firestorm, right?
Yeah, it's a band called Earth Crisis. They're like a vegan straight edge hardcore band from the 90s. They have a song called Firestorm, which is a sort of anthem and a terrible song all at the same time.
Because and then at the end of the episode, you close the episode by playing the song. 100% accurate. It's one of the worst pieces of crap I've ever heard.
It's very bad.
Highly enjoyed the episode. You also reviewed Police Academy, Jaws. I listened to the Blair Witch Project yesterday. I listened to Alien Ant Farm when I was at the gym today. And I hadn't heard that song Movies in. I think we used to play that. Now, a little background. Frank was one of the first people that I met freshman year at college, Monmouth University, and we became good friends. And I remember one of the first few days of freshman orientation, there were posters all around campus, join the college radio station. And you came to me and you were like, hey man, we should go to that meeting. So
I was all about it. I was like, day one, put me on the radio.
Because it's a college radio station. It's a college music format. And like for me, I've never been a huge music guy at all. So honestly, the format, whatever, I didn't care. If it was country music, I would have been like, yeah, cool, that sounds like fun. So I remember going to that first meeting, and in the third floor of the student center, there were like 100 people jammed into this tiny room that holds 10 people. And I remember thinking, there's no chance I'm going to get a radio show. I'm out of here. So I bailed. You ended up getting a radio show, but you went through like a couple different co-hosts who were who kind of flaked out. And
I also like submitted a tape and did not get a show.
Okay.
And I was denied a show. And then this girl on the second floor of our dorm, Carrie, got a show.
Carrie, I remember.
She bailed after a couple of weeks, so I took over her show.
Yep.
And then sort of like just worked my way through, even though I wasn't exactly invited in. Found a way to have a show.
True or false? Your radio show with Carrie was called Morning Wood.
Potentially true. I cannot remember that.
I do remember that. I remember helping you put
Sounds accurate.
I remember helping you put up flyers around campus that said Morning Wood with a question mark, and then it was like pictures of you and Carrie giving the face.
My God. Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
So then it was. I remember about halfway through second semester of freshman year, I ended up becoming your co-host because, I don't know, you couldn't, like, nobody else would consistently do it.
Correct.
So I was like, by default, I was now on the radio, which is I still credit you for basically changing the trajectory of my life, because if I hadn't done that, I mean, I'm still working in radio. This is 20 years later, which is like one of the most remarkable things ever. But so your most recent episode, you talk about the band Alien Ant Farm, specifically the song Movies, which I don't think I've heard since we played it on WMCX 88.9 FM about, anywhere from 18 to 20 years ago.
That's a shame. It's a great song. It's a real banger. Check it out.
So here's what we're thinking. Maybe on a weekly basis, we can do like a little cross promotion where you guys can promote us, we promote you, and everybody wins because they're both. Because the true winner is the listener.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah,
obviously.
Because we're all desperate, Frank. That's what we're getting at, right?
So,
that works for me.
Well,
we're happy to promote anything, anybody who's willing to give us money or anything. We're happy to schlock whatever it is.
Well, I listened because I listened to 5 or 6 episodes, like I was saying, and your podcast felt very familiar to listen to it. I was like, that's what we do. Now, granted, you may talk more about music or movies, but the tone of it is exactly the same. Couple of buddies hanging out, just recording and talking about the things that they enjoy.
Just trying to have a good time.
Trying to have a good time.
Yeah, that was sort of the impetus. The reason we're reviewing things is just a reason to have a conversation with your best friend, and sort of yuck it up. So.
I just want to make it clear, Kyle and I are in no way best friends. We simply have started this podcast, and now we are obligated to do it once a week.
Yeah, listen, Frank, when we started this in 2016, there was a real wide valley, and there was a hole that needed to be filled in terms of middle-class white guys talking in podcast form. And so Steve and I had to step up to the plate and really fill that void.
Yeah, I mean, when else does a 30-something white guy get to really have his voice heard?
Right.
Never.
Exactly. And it's a very important voice to have in the world.
Yeah, right. Yes. Definitely.
That adds to the social dialogue.
Yeah, how else would the stories about underwear wrestling make it into the mainstream?
Were we in our underwear? Why was it underwear?
No, it wasn't underwear, but that's on this podcast. That's just what it's evolved into.
I see. Thank God.
Yeah, basically.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I just remember details the way I heard them, Frank. And I remember Steve telling me he was covering his junk, sprinting up the stairs in his underwear because, quick as the flash, those girls definitely wouldn't recognize Steve as one of the guys who lived there.
Yeah, I went upstairs, no doubt, to change into my cool clothes, and then stroll down the steps and be like, "Oh, hey, ladies, didn't see you come in."
Yeah, he had to go put on his Jinko jeans and his, his Tommy Hilfiger shirt.
What was your character name, Steve?
I don't remember. I can't. I couldn't possibly remember. But the thing is, I know that because Ray was videotaping it, and that videotape, it has to exist somewhere. When was the last time you talked to Ray?
2009.
Okay, so you went to visit him, right? Like he was in Houston or something?
Yeah, I went to visit him and had a very unpleasant experience.
I remember you saying that you were in his apartment or his house for 1 or 2 minutes before you realized it was a big mistake.
Yeah, it was one of those situations where you realize that your friend hasn't changed very much, and like you're still kind of. It wasn't great. It was tense, I guess, for me. I mean, I think maybe he had a good time. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to need a nominee, Frank, of all the people who lived in that house and knew Ray. I need someone to get in touch with him. We need to get our hands on this videotape so we can get more details regarding the wrestling.
I guess I still have his email. I'm not trying to email him, but I guess I still have his email address.
You know what? Flip it off to me. I'll act as a liaison.
I still remember his phone number, but I remember he gave after he moved because Ray moved to Budapest for a while.
Yes,
and he gave his phone number to his brother, Sex Ed.
Right. Yes.
But yes. there have been many times where I've thought I should text it and see if it's still, because if it's Ed's number, he'd be able to get me in touch with Ray, no doubt.
Yeah, I just searched my phone while we're talking. I think the last correspondence we had was 2009, 2008.
Wow. Man, the journey continues.
Like he can reach out if he wants to, I guess, right?
Yeah, I don't know. We didn't exactly. The last interaction I had with him wasn't exactly the best, so I don't know if we'll rekindle that romance anytime soon.
What was that? Do you remember? Was that him leaving or no?
It was.
We've never gotten into it, and boy, that seems like an 80-20.
No, that's
what we call a tease in the biz, Frank.
It was because after he left, I still communicated with him for a while, but it was after he left that I realized that essentially the last 3 years he had been. While we had been hanging out all the time, he had been saying very mean things about me.
Oh, right.
To someone else.
Yes, I remember that.
And so.
Now I recall.
Yeah.
Anywho.
But on the bright side, go ahead and give your latest podcast a plug.
So we're happy to do that. We're going to record tomorrow. We're going to do a holiday episode where we all watch National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation together.
Love it.
So we'll play a tone, and you can essentially watch along with us.
Okay.
And then we're going to do another episode before the end of the year where we review the year 2010.
Just the entire year.
The year as it stands.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
I like it.
So you could tune in for that if you wish. But yeah.
The podcast is called Frank and Eric. Frank
Correct.
and Eric, a podcast.
Correct. Yes. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple iTunes. Wherever you get your podcasts, that's where we are.
Looks like you have an episode where you guys tasted pumpkin spice lattes?
Yeah, that didn't go very well. That wasn't the best episode.
we did
copycats.
Yeah, we did that a year ago. Where were you, Frank? Yeah. Come on, buddy.
Welcome aboard.
I would just skip over that one if you're looking. So,
my favorite part about your podcast, they're about anywhere from an hour to an hour and 20 minutes long. It looks like. I like how you talk about the actual subject for about 20 minutes, then you go off on tangents for about 45 minutes, and then you end it by saying, "And that was our review of Police Academy."
Yep.
It really makes me laugh at the end of each episode when you bring when you bring it all back around.
Well, I appreciate your listening and I appreciate your calling.
Yeah, definitely. I'll text you after. We'll work out some kind of details so we can swap some listeners, and then we'll all be rich because we're famous podcasters.
Just imagine all the money coming your way, Frank. Oh my God!
Yes.
Start buying a new house.
I'll quit my job on Monday.
Yeah. All right, man. It was good talking to you. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
See ya.
Oh man,
good old Frank.
A look into Steve's past there.
What are we doing? Who's calling me now? What?
Is it Brian? Does he want more?
I don't know.
Leave it alone.
Yeah, what the hell? But yeah, that's
always a pleasure to look back.
It's good to talk to Frank. I haven't talked to him in it's been a while. Honestly, the last time I talked to him on the phone was probably when we called him on this podcast, and that was a while ago.
Sounds like we've got we're on our way to making money.
Ooh, yeah. Do you think we wait a little while? Wait after a couple episodes to invite him to Lisbon, Living in Style Podcast Network?
I mean, he's got to pay the entry fee.
They got a good logo too. They have a great logo. I'm really jealous of it.
Frank spent 4 hours on it.
Frank is a graphic designer, but look at that. Isn't that beautiful?
Oh wow, that looks nice.
It's a hand, and it's because their whole thing. They end each episode with "Stay Positive." So it's Frank and Erica podcast with a hand, and then if you look at the hand, it's got the words "Stay Positive."
Oh, look at that!
Scattered throughout them.
Huh. Well, at least we got ours.
Hey, our logo took hours.
Hours and hours.
God, that was fun.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. So, yeah, again, if you'd like to do something like that, exchange some podcast hits, message us on Twitter or Facebook at Steve and Kyle.
We have our podcast BFFs now. It's Frank and Eric.
Yeah, you're already behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
So you're already going to have to play catch up, if you will. You're going to have to really knock our socks off. If you want to do that, that's not true at all. But no, send us a message there so we can do that.
Yeah. What are we doing now? Do we have anything else to get to?
Nope. I was supposed to be home 15 minutes ago.
Okay, so what you're saying is should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, sure. That's not a terrible idea. We didn't even get to mention the winter solstice gift. The winter solstice gift exchange, which is well underway. Everybody receiving gifts. If you haven't received yours yet, I don't think there's any reason to be alarmed. But send us a message by the end of this week if you haven't, and we'll double check and triple check and make sure everything's happening as it should be for you.
Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Steve and Kyle. Always leave reviews. You can do questions, comments, or concerns. 424-30-SK-POD, 424-307-5763. We don't get many voicemails.
No.
I'd like to get some voicemails.
I'd love to get some voicemails.
I think we should have a voicemail section of the show.
Yeah.
If you're listening, 424-307-5763. That's 424-30-SK-POD. Leave us a message. We'll play it on the next episode. All right? Sound good? Everyone happy?
The big gift exchange among the staff.
Oh, yeah, next week. Thanks to our guest this week. In the field Jewish correspondent Brian. And my buddy Frank. You can check them out. It's Frank and Eric. I believe it's just frankanderic.com, but they're on all of on my iPhone. I just subscribe to them in the Apple Podcast app, but I know it's Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, anywhere you get podcasts. Editor's note, Eric with a K. So thanks to them. Hopefully we'll be hearing more from them in the coming weeks. I think you'll enjoy their podcast. If you like ours, you'll definitely like them. It'll sound very familiar. Talk to you next week. You got anything else?
That's it.
All right. See ya.